There are many reasons why a scene may have been cut from a movie, but there's this one scene in Attack of the Clones that I felt, while short, was very interesting. Before everyone asks Jocasta about Kamino, which happens at around the 34-minute mark of the movie, they actually have a brief conversation about Count Dooku. Yeah, go figure, that head bust that Obi-Wan was looking at in the movie was actually Count Dooku. I never noticed it until I saw this deleted scene. Jocasta spoke very highly of Count Dooku.
He has a very powerful face, doesn't he?
Man, she is thirsty for Count Dooku, isn't she? But Obi-Wan asks a really good question. Why did Dooku leave the Jedi Order? A question that was answered in Legends, but also used later in the current canon in the audiobook Dooku Jedi Lost, and of course Tales of the Jedi. But Jocasta says to Obi-Wan that, much like Qui-Gon Jinn, Dooku was an independent thinker, an idealist. But in the end, she speculates that he simply lost his faith in the Republic, and then mentioned that he disappeared for 9 or 10 years, and then re-emerged as the head of the Separatists. But with all that, Obi-Wan is still left confused. I really love this scene because it keeps Dooku not only on Obi-Wan's mind, but so on the audience's mind. Or would have if the scene stayed in. This scene would have reminded you, hey, you should be thinking about this guy is important. I mean, the only times that Dooku was mentioned before we see him on Geonosis, in an hour and 15 to 60 minutes in, was in the opening crawl, and 6 minutes in, after Padme accuses Count Dooku of being behind her assassination attempt, Ki-Adi-Mundi simply says he's a political idealist, not a murderer, and then Mace Windu adds,
Count Dooku was once a Jedi. He couldn't assassinate anyone. It's not in his character.
And then since then, so many crazy shit happens that you kind of forget about Dooku. And then the only time that he's kind of mentioned before you see him on Geonosis is when Jango Fett tells Obi-Wan 50 minutes into the movie that he was working with a man named Tyrannus. But if you've seen the movie for the first time, you don't know that Count Dooku is Tyrannus until the very end of the movie when Sidious calls him Tyrannus. But I think adding this deleted scene would have given him more of an ominous presence. But again, you kind of forget about him because so much shit happens. I mean, by the time you finally get to them in an hour and 15 to 16 minutes in, it just doesn't have that big impact that you probably should feel for the big bad guy. Like, you remember in Phantom Menace when, like, at the 27-minute mark, you actually see Darth Maul for the first time, and then you see him sporadically throughout the movie, and then at the end, at around an hour and 50 minutes, Maul showed up at the end? Like, that was cool. Can you imagine if they just threw his name a couple times at the beginning, and then he just never shows up until halfway of the movie? That'd be weird.